The red warning lights flashed across the command center of Zelari. Prime. Elder Thesis pressed his long fingers against the cold metal console, watching the screen show nothing but destruction. His people were dying. Their beautiful blue cities were burning. The Vorthok ships hung in the sky like black metal vultures, raining death on everything below. How many worlds have we lost? Thesis asked his aide, though he feared the answer. 17 colonies, Elder. The outer rim is completely gone. They are moving toward the core worlds now. Young Zelari's voice shook with terror. Our defense ships lasted less than an hour against their fleet. Thesis closed his eyes. The Zelari had never been warriors. They built gardens, not weapons. They wrote poetry, not battle plans. For 1,000 years they had lived in peace, believing that all intelligent life would choose harmony over violence. They had been so very wrong. The Vorthok Dominion had appeared at their borders 3 months ago. No warning, no demands, or no chance to surrender. They simply began killing. World after world fell to their massive ships and cruel soldiers. The Zelari tried to negotiate, tried to offer tribute, tried to run. Nothing worked. The Vorthok wanted only one thing: complete destruction of anyone who was not them. Elder, we are receiving another transmission from the Vorthok fleet, his aide said, his voice barely a whisper. Put it through. The hologram appeared above the console. Commander Zethkar of the Vorthok Third Fleet looked exactly like what nightmares were made of. His gray skin was covered in ritual scars. His forearms ended in claws that could tear metal. His black eyes held no mercy, no emotion except cold pleasure at causing pain. Zelari worms. Zethkar's voice was like grinding stone. You have 6 of your time periods to evacuate your capital world. Your species will serve as an example to others who think they can exist without bowing to the Dominion. The transmission ended. Disses stared at the empty space where the monster had been. 6 hours. No, that was all the time his people had left. Elder, what do we do? His aide asked. Disses turned to look at his communications officer. Can you boost our deep space transmitter to maximum range? Yes, Elder, but why? There are no Zelari ships left to call for help. I am not calling for Zelari ships. Thesis walked to the great window that looked out over his burning world. Send a message to anyone who might hear it. Every frequency, every language we know. Tell them who we are. Tell them what is happening to us. Tell them that if any species in this galaxy has mercy in their hearts, we beg them to help us. Communications officer looked confused. But Elder, no one will come. The galaxy is vast. Even if someone receives our message, why would they risk their own people for strangers? Because, Thesis said softly, watching another Zelari transport ship explode in the distance, sometimes miracles happen. Sometimes when good people cry for help, someone answers. Far across the galaxy on a small blue and green world called Earth, Dr. Lisa Martinez was having a very bad day. The new deep space receiver had been acting up for weeks. Strange signals kept coming through the background noise. Most of them were just natural phenomena from distant stars, but some seemed almost like they might be artificial. Lisa rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. She had been working for 16 hours straight, trying to make sense of the patterns in the signals. The government had spent billions on this project, hoping to finally prove that humans were not alone in the universe. So far, all they had found was cosmic static and her growing headache. Dr. Martinez, her assistant, Carl Peterson, poked his head through the doorway. You should probably go home and get some sleep. Just give me another hour, Carl. I think I'm on to something. Here. Lisa turned back to her screens, adjusting the filters on the signal processor. You said that 3 hours ago. Lisa was about to argue when every screen in the lab suddenly lit up. Alarms started blaring. The signal processor began recording data faster than she had ever seen it work. What the hell is that? Carl ran to his console, typing commands as fast as he could. It's a transmission, Lisa whispered, staring at the patterns flowing across her monitor. A very powerful transmission. Someone is broadcasting this on every frequency at once. Someone? Lisa looked up at Carl, her face pale. It's not coming from Earth. For the next 4 hours, Lisa and her team worked to decode the alien transmission. The language was unlike anything human linguists had ever encountered, but the mathematical patterns helped them build a translation matrix. Slowly, word by word, the message became clear. "My God," Lisa breathed as she read the final translation. "Carl, get me General Hayes on the secure line. Wake him up if you have to." "What does it say?" Lisa printed out the translation and handed it to him. Carl read it twice, his face growing more serious with each word. "To any who can hear this message," it began. "We are the Zelari of the Rimward Spiral. We're a peaceful people who have never harmed another species. We build gardens and create art. We have families and children who laugh and play in our cities. Today those cities are burning. An empire called the Vorthok Dominion has come to our worlds. They kill without reason. They destroy without purpose. They say, we must all die simply because we exist. Our ships are broken. Our soldiers are dead. In 6 hours they will finish what they started. We do not ask you to die for us. Only ask that you remember us. Remember that we tried to live in peace. Remember that we called out into the darkness, hoping that somewhere in this vast galaxy, someone might hear us and care. If you have children, hold them close tonight. Tell them about the Zelari, who loved life but could not defend it. This is our final message. This is our goodbye." Carl set down the paper with shaking hands. "This is real, isn't it?" "They're really. Are aliens out there? And they're about to be wiped out?" Lisa was already dialing the secure line. "General Hayes?" "This is Dr. Martinez at Deep Space Communications. Sir, I need you to get down here right now. And sir, you're going to want to bring Admiral Blake with you." 2 hours later, the secure conference room at Deep Space Command was packed with the most important military officers in the country. General Patrick Hayes sat at the head of the table, reading the alien message for the 3rd time. Admiral Susan Blake paced back and forth behind him, her face hard as stone. "How long ago was this?" "Sent?" Admiral Blake asked. "Based on the signal decay about 18 hours ago," Lisa replied. "If their time measurements are similar to ours, they have maybe 12 hours left. Can we respond?" General Hayes asked. "Our transmitters aren't powerful enough to reach their galaxy, sir. But theoretically, if we launched one of our new faster-than-light communication probes, we could establish contact in about 6 hours. Admiral Blake stopped pacing. "That's cutting it close." General Hayes stood up slowly. "Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 24 hours, we have discovered that aliens exist and that there is an intergalactic war happening right now. We've also learned that there is a peaceful species about to be completely destroyed by what sounds like space monsters." He looked around the room at the faces of the most powerful military leaders on Earth. "The question before us is simple. Do we try to help them?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew this decision would change human history forever. Admiral Blake was the first to speak. "Sir, we don't know anything about space combat. We've never even left our own solar system with anything bigger than a research probe." "That's true," General Hayes agreed. "We also don't know if we can get there in time, or if our weapons would work against these Vorthok, or if we'd just be flying to our own deaths." He paused, looking at each person in the room. "But we do know one thing. Somewhere out there, innocent people are crying for help. And if we don't at least try to answer that call, what does that make us?" The vote was unanimous. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching Earth grow smaller in the view screen. 3 weeks had passed since the decision to help the Zelari, and those 3 weeks had changed everything. The ship around him was humanity's first real attempt at building a weapon designed for space warfare. And Jake still could not quite believe it was real. The Vengeance was not pretty. Earth's engineers had focused on function over form, building a ship that looked more like a flying fortress than the sleek vessels in science fiction movies. Thick armor plating covered every surface. Missile tubes and railgun turrets stuck out from the hull like the spines of some metal beast. The bridge sat deep inside the ship, protected by meters of steel and ceramic armor. "Captain, we'll be jumping to hyperspace in 10 minutes, reported Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks from his position at the tactical station. Ryan had been Jake's choice for the job. A man who had spent 15 years studying military history and another 10 fighting in Earth's last few regional conflicts. "Good! How are the other ships?" Jake asked. "All green, sir. The Lincoln, the Washington, and the Roosevelt are ready to jump. Support ships are staying close to formation." Jake nodded, looking at the tactical display that showed the 4 human warships. Each one carried the best weapons humanity could build in 3 weeks, along with crews who had volunteered, knowing they might never come home. Behind them followed 6 support vessels loaded with supplies, medical equipment, and engineers. Captain called Chief Engineer Tony Garrett from the engineering station. "I've got the hyperspace engines running smooth as silk. These new drives are incredible. We'll be able to make the trip to the Zelari system in just under 4 days." Jake smiled grimly. The same trip would have taken thousands of years with old rocket technology, a breakthrough in faster than light. Travel had come just in time, reverse engineered from the alien transmission itself. Human scientists had worked around the clock to understand the physics behind interstellar communication, and somehow managed to build engines based on the same principles. "Major Sullivan, how are our Marines?" Jake asked, turning to the woman at the rear of the bridge. Major Kate Sullivan had been handpicked from the Marine Corps Special Operations Division. She was small and quiet, but Jake had seen her service. Kate had led combat missions on 3 continents and never lost a single person under her command. 200 Marines aboard each ship, sir. They're as ready as we can make them for fighting in space. We've run every training simulation we could think of, but honestly, we're making this up as we go." "That's what humans do best," Jake replied. "We figure it out as we go." The past 3 weeks had been the most intense period of military preparation in human history. Every major nation on Earth had contributed resources, personnel, and technology. The world's best military minds had worked together to design tactics for space combat. Even though none of them had ever seen a real space battle, Captain, incoming. Transmission from Earth Command, reported Communications Officer Amy Foster from her station. Amy had been chosen not just for her technical skills, but because she had the fastest reaction time of any pilot in the Air Force. In space combat, those few extra milliseconds might mean the difference between life and death. "Put it through, Admiral." Blake's voice filled the bridge through the speakers. "Captain Morrison, this is your final briefing before you leave our communication range. Our intelligence teams have been analyzing every bit of data we could extract from the Zelari transmission." Jake listened carefully as Admiral Blake continued. The Vorthok appear to be a standard conquest-based empire. They use superior technology and numbers to overwhelm their enemies quickly. Their ships are heavily shielded, but seem to rely primarily on energy weapons. Our analysts believe their tactics are probably straightforward. Get close and blast everything until it stops moving. "What about the Zelari themselves, Admiral?" "Complete pacifists. Captain, they've never fought a war in their recorded history. Think of them as the galaxy's librarians, very smart, very peaceful, and completely helpless against this kind of aggression." Ryan Brooks looked up from his tactical station. "Admiral, do we have any idea how large the Vorthok fleet is? Based?" "On the Zelari reports, we estimate somewhere between 50 and 100 ships. Each one is probably larger than our vessels, with more advanced technology." Jake felt his stomach tighten. 4 human ships against up to 100 alien warships. The odds were not good. However, Admiral Blake continued, "Remember that the Vorthok have probably never fought an enemy like us. They're used to dealing with civilizations that either surrender immediately or put up token resistance. They've never faced an opponent that actually wants to fight." "Understood, Admiral. We'll make contact as soon as we reach the Zelari system." "Good luck, Captain. Earth is counting on you." Blake out. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake looked around at his crew. These men and women had volunteered for what was essentially a suicide mission. They were flying across the galaxy to fight monsters they had never seen, to save people they had never met, using technology that barely worked. Captain Ryan said, quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Do you really think we can win this?" Jake was quiet for a moment. Out. It was a fair question. The Vorthok had superior numbers, superior technology, and centuries of experience in space warfare. Humanity had enthusiasm and desperation, but that might not be enough. Ryan, I'll tell you what my grandfather told me when I was a kid. He fought. In the last World War, back when humans were still fighting each other instead of working together, he said that in every battle there comes a moment when both sides are exhausted, when both sides are scared, when both sides want to quit. The winner is whoever keeps fighting for just 1 minute longer. Jake turned to look out the view screen at the stars ahead. The Vorthok think they're fighting another peaceful species that will break and run when things get tough. They don't. No, they're fighting humans. They don't know we come from a planet where everything is trying to kill us. Where we had to become the most dangerous thing in the forest just to survive. Major Sullivan smiled coldly. They're about to learn. 30 seconds to hyperspace jump. Tony called from engineering. Jake settled into his captain's chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In 30 seconds, we will make the jump to hyperspace. When we come out the other side, we will be in the Zelari system, probably in the middle of an alien war zone. He paused, thinking about the words that would send his crew into the unknown. I want you all to remember why we're here. Somewhere ahead of us, innocent people are dying. They sent out a call for help, and we answered. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us different from the monsters we're going to fight. We don't conquer. We don't destroy for the fun of it. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Jake looked around the bridge one more time, seeing the determination in every face. We are the USS Vengeance, and we carry the hopes of Earth with us. Whatever happens next, we're going to show this galaxy what humans are capable of when someone threatens the innocent. All stations, prepare for hyperspace. The stars outside the view screen suddenly stretched into long lines of light as the hyperspace engines engaged. The 4 human warships disappeared into the space between spaces, racing toward a distant battle. That would decide the fate of 2 species. In the engineering section, Tony monitored the hyperspace drive carefully. The technology was new and untested over such long distances. If something went wrong, they would be lost between dimensions. Forever, in the Marine quarters, Kate Sullivan checked her equipment one more time. Her Marines were the best soldiers Earth had ever produced. They were about to face enemies that had conquered dozens of worlds. On the bridge, Jake stared at the swirling colors of hyperspace and thought about the message the Zelari had sent. A cry for help from across the galaxy. Asking if anyone out there cared enough to answer. The monsters of Earth were coming, and they were very angry. The USS Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zelari system, and Captain Jake Morrison immediately knew they were too late to prevent the slaughter. The tactical display lit up with dozens of contacts burning ships, debris, fields, and the massive dark shapes of Vorthok warships continuing their work of destruction. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks, staring at his sensor readouts. Captain, I'm reading 17 Vorthok heavy cruisers, for dreadnoughts, and at least 30 smaller ships. They're spread out across the system, hunting down refugee transports. Jake watched the main screen as it showed a Zelari civilian ship trying desperately to escape. It was small and fragile looking, probably carrying families who had managed to flee their homeworld. A massive Vorthok destroyer was chasing it, firing bursts of red energy that lit up space like deadly fireworks. Time to intercept that destroyer? Jake asked. 3 minutes at full speed? Amy Foster replied from the helm. But Captain, we'll be flying right into the middle of their fleet. Good, Amy. Take us in fast and loud. I want every Vorthok ship in this system to know we're here. Jake activated the tactical channel. All ships, this is Morrison. Execute attack pattern Alpha. Target the destroyer chasing that refugee ship. Weapons free. The 4 human warships accelerated toward the battle zone, their engines burning bright blue trails against the darkness. The USS Lincoln, Washington, and Roosevelt formed up alongside the Vengeance, their missile tubes opening like the mouths of hungry metal beasts. Captain, the Vorthok destroyer has detected us, Ryan reported. They're turning to engage. Let them come. Fire everything we have. The Vengeance unleashed its first salvo of weapons into the alien ship. Unlike the energy weapons the Vorthok were used to fighting, humans had built their space warships around kinetic projectiles and nuclear missiles. Chunks of tungsten traveling at incredible speeds slammed into the destroyer's shields, followed by a spread of fusion warheads that lit up space like tiny suns. The Vorthok ship staggered under the impact. Its shields flared and sparked, overloaded by weapons they had never encountered before. The destroyer tried to return fire, but its energy beams splashed uselessly against the thick armor plating of the human ships. "Direct hit," Tony called. "From engineering, their shields are down to 60% and falling. Fire again. All ships, concentrate fire on that destroyer." The combined firepower of 4 human warships hammered the alien vessel. Railgun rounds punched through its hull like paper. Nuclear missiles detonated against its superstructure, tearing away armor plating and weapon systems. Within 2 minutes of the engagement, the destroyer was drifting dead in space. "Target destroyed," Captain Ryan reported, his voice filled with amazement. 1 shot, 1 kill. But there was no time to celebrate. The tactical display showed more Vorthok ships turning toward them, drawn by the destruction of their companion. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission from the Zelari refugee ship," Amy said. "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge, speaking in the musical language of the Zelari. The translation came through a moment later. "Unknown ships, you saved us. Who are you?" Thought all hope was lost. Jake opened a channel. "This is Captain Morrison of Earth. We received your distress call. We're here to help." There was silence for several seconds. Then, "Earth, we have never heard of this world. Came all this way to help strangers?" "That's what we do," Jake replied simply. "Get your people to safety. We'll handle the rest." Vorthok cruisers were approaching fast, their weapons already charging. Jake studied the tactical display, noting their formation and speed. The aliens were coming straight at them in a line, probably expecting the humans to either run or surrender like every other species they had fought. "Ryan, what do you think? Hammer and anvil?" Ryan smiled grimly. "Against opponents who've never seen real tactics, they won't know what hit them." Jake activated the fleet channel. "All ships, execute Maneuver 7. Washington and Roosevelt swing wide and come in from their flank. Lincoln, stay with us and hit them head-on." The human ships split up, using 3-dimensional movement that the Vorthok had never encountered before. Most space battles in this part of the galaxy were simple affairs, 2 lines of ships shooting at each, until one side was destroyed. The Vorthok had never fought opponents who used complex maneuvers and coordinated attacks. "Contact in 30 seconds, Amy reported. "Major Sullivan, get your Marines ready for boarding actions." Jake ordered. Kate Sullivan activated her combat suit and checked her weapons. "Copy that, Captain. The boys are itching for a fight." The battle began when the Vorthok cruisers opened fire at long range. Their energy beams lanced through space, but the human ships were already moving, dodging and weaving like fighters instead of the slow, predictable targets the aliens expected. "Return fire," Jake commanded. The Vengeance and Lincoln opened up with their main guns. Tungsten rounds and nuclear missiles crossed the space between the fleets in seconds. The lead Vorthok cruiser took a direct hit from 3 different directions. As the Washington and Roosevelt completed their flanking maneuver, "Their shields are adapting to our energy weapons," Ryan reported, "but they can't adapt to kinetic projectiles. Every solid hit goes straight through." The Vorthok formation began to break apart as the aliens realized they were facing something completely different from their usual enemies. The human ships moved through space like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attacks and supporting each other with a precision that spoke of centuries of warfare evolution. "Captain, we're being hailed by the Vorthok fleet commander," Amy announced. "What?" "It through. I want to hear what they have to say." The view screen filled with the image of Commander Zethkar, the same alien whose threats had driven the Zelari to desperation. His forearms gestured angrily as he spoke in his harsh, grinding language. "Unknown ships, you interfere with Dominion business? Withdraw immediately, or be destroyed. We have defeated 100 species. You cannot stand against us." Jake stood, up from his captain's chair and walked closer to the view screen. When he spoke, his voice was calm but filled with cold rage. "This is Captain Morrison of the human fleet. You made a mistake when you decided to hurt innocent people. You made an even bigger mistake when you thought we would run away." The alien commander's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Humans. We have never heard of this species. Your ships are small. Your weapons are primitive. You will be easy prey. You're about to learn something about humans." Jake replied, "We didn't crawl our way to the top of the food chain on our planet by being easy prey. We did it by being the most dangerous thing in the dark." Jake cut the transmission and turned back to his crew. "All ships, general attack. Show them what Earth's monsters can do." The human fleet attacked with a ferocity that stunned the Vorthok forces. Every human ship fought with the accumulated knowledge of every war humanity had ever waged. They used tactics developed in ancient naval battles, combined with strategies learned from air combat, adapted for three-dimensional space warfare. Amy Foster proved that human reflexes evolved for survival on a deadly world were faster than anything the Vorthok had encountered. She piloted the Vengeance through their formation like it was dancing, avoiding their weapons while positioning. The ship for perfect shots. Ryan Brooks coordinated the attack with a precision that came from studying military history his entire life. He predicted the enemy movements and positioned the human ships to exploit every weakness in their formation. Tony Garrett kept the engines running at power levels that should have been impossible, pushing the human ships beyond their design limits, because he knew that in battle, impossible was just another word for necessary. Within an hour, 6 Vorthok ships were drifting dead in space. The rest of the alien fleet was pulling back, trying to regroup and understand what they were fighting. Captain Ryan reported, "The remaining Vorthok ships are retreating to the inner system. They're calling for reinforcements." Jake nodded. Watching the tactical display, first battle was won, but the war was just beginning. Could let them call for help. The more of them that come here, the fewer innocent people they can hurt somewhere else. He opened a channel to the Zelari survivors. "This is Captain Morrison. You're safe for now. Can you tell us how many of your people are still alive?" The reply came back filled with gratitude and grief. "Captain Morrison of Earth, there are perhaps 2 million Zelari left alive in the inner system. The Vorthok have them trapped on 3 worlds, preparing for final extermination. Can you really save them all?" Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These men and women had just fought their first space battle and won. It had proven that human weapons and tactics worked against advanced aliens. Most importantly, they had shown that when the innocent called for help, Earth would answer. "We didn't come all this way to save some of your people," Jake replied. "Came to save all of them." Admiral Korthvin of the Vorthok Dominion stared at the tactical display aboard his flagship. The Crimson Death, in his 300 years of conquest. He had never seen anything like the reports coming from the Zelari system. A small fleet of unknown ships had destroyed 6 of his vessels and forced the rest to retreat. It was impossible. "Show me the recordings again," he ordered his tactical officer. The holographic display replayed the battle footage. Korthvin watched the human ships move through space with an agility that defied everything he knew about space combat. Their weapons punched through Vorthok shields like they were not even there. Most disturbing of all, they fought with a coordination that spoke of long experience in warfare. "What species are these humans?" Korthvin demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. They are not in any of our conquest databases. The prisoners we took from other worlds have never heard of them either." Korthvin's forearms clenched into fists. The Dominion had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They had crushed every species that dared to resist them. The idea that some unknown race could appear from nowhere and challenge their superiority was unthinkable. "Prepare the 2nd and 3rd fleets for immediate deployment. Want 100 ships in the Zelari system within 2 days. These humans will learn that no one defies the Dominion." Meanwhile, in the Zelari system, Captain Jake Morrison was learning just how much damage the Vorthok had done in their months of occupation. The human fleet had taken position near the largest surviving Zelari world, planet called Thyros, where nearly 1 million civilians were trapped. "Captain, we're receiving detailed reports from the surface," reported Communications Officer Amy Foster. "The Vorthok have built prison camps around every major city. They're using the Zelari as forced labor to strip mine the planet's resources." Felt his anger growing as he listened to the reports. The Vorthok were not just conquering the Zelari. They were systematically destroying their entire civilization, turning a peaceful people into slaves before eventually killing them all. "What about their orbital defenses?" asked Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks. 12 defense platforms around the planet, plus the remaining Vorthok fleet," Amy replied. 37 ships total, including 2 dreadnoughts. Jake studied the tactical display. The Vorthok had positioned their ships in a defensive formation around Thyros, using the planet and its millions of civilian prisoners as a shield. Any direct assault would result in massive casualties among the very people they were trying to save. "Major Sullivan, how would your Marines handle a ground assault?" Kate Sullivan pulled up the surface scans on her tactical pad. "It would be tough, Captain. The Vorthok have fortified positions around every camp. They've got anti-aircraft weapons and energy barriers. Plus, if we start landing troops, they might just decide to kill all the prisoners rather than let us rescue them." Jake nodded grimly. This was exactly the kind of complex problem that the Vorthok had probably never faced before. Most species they conquered either surrendered immediately or fought conventional space battles that ended quickly. They were not used to opponents who cared about civilian casualties or thought in terms of rescue operations. "Ryan, what if we don't fight a conventional battle?" "What do you mean, Captain?" "The Vorthok expect us to either attack their fleet directly or try to bombard their positions from orbit. What if we do something completely different?"
Jake walked over to the tactical
display and began pointing to different positions around the planet. Their defense platforms are automated. Their ships are in formation to repel a frontal assault. But look at this. They've left the night side of the planet almost undefended. Ryan studied the display carefully. "You want to insert teams on the dark side and work our way to the prison camps from the ground?" "Exactly. While we keep their fleet busy up here, our Marines infiltrate the surface and start liberating the camps one by one. The Vorthok won't expect a species capable of space travel to bother with ground combat." Kate Sullivan smiled coldly. "Captain, my Marines would love the chance to show these aliens how humans fight when we're protecting innocent people." "It happened, Major. I want insertion teams ready in 6 hours." The next few hours were a flurry of activity as the human fleet prepared for their most ambitious operation yet. Kate Sullivan selected her best soldiers for the ground teams. Men and women who had fought in Earth's toughest conflicts and never backed down from a challenge. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Tony Garrett worked with his team to modify the ships. Shuttlecraft for stealth insertion. They installed additional armor and shielding to help the shuttles avoid Vorthok sensors during the approach to the planet's surface. As the human preparations continued, Admiral Korthfin's reinforcements arrived in the outer system. 100 Vorthok warships dropped out of hyperspace and began moving toward the inner planets where the human fleet waited. "Captain, massive sensor contacts on the edge of the system," Amy reported. 100 ships minimum, all heading our way." Jake studied the tactical display as it filled with red enemy contacts. The odds had just gotten much worse for human ships against over 130 Vorthok vessels. By any reasonable calculation, they should retreat immediately. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake announced over the fleet channel. "The Vorthok have brought reinforcements. We are now outnumbered roughly 30-1. There was a moment of silence as every human crew member absorbed this information. However, Jake continued, "We did not come this far to run away when things got difficult. We came here to save innocent people, and that is exactly what we are going to do. All ships prepare for Operation Guardian Angel." The human fleet split up, with each ship taking a different position around the planet Thyros. They would not try to fight the combined Vorthok fleet in a single battle instead. They would use hit-and-run tactics to draw the enemy ships away from the planet while the Marine teams worked on the surface. "Your teams are cleared for insertion," Jake announced. Kate Sullivan and her Marines loaded into the modified shuttles and launched toward the night side of Thyros. The small craft used every stealth technique human engineers could devise, flying low and fast to avoid the Vorthok sensor networks. As the shuttles disappeared into the planet's atmosphere, Admiral Korthvin arrived with his main fleet. The massive Vorthok formation moved into the system like a steel avalanche, expecting to crush the human ships through sheer numbers. Unknown vessels, came the transmission from the Vorthok flagship. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and we will grant you a quick death. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and activated the response channel. When he spoke, his voice was calm but filled with deadly promise. Admiral Korthvin, this is Captain Morrison. You want to know what kind of species we are? We're the kind that traveled across the galaxy because strangers asked for help. We're the kind that will fight 100 ships with 4 if that's what it takes to protect innocent people. Jake paused, looking out at the approaching enemy fleet. And we're the kind that gets very, very angry when we see bullies hurting those who can't fight back. You want a war, Admiral? You've got one. The Vorthok fleet opened fire, filling space with energy beams and plasma bolts. But the human ships were already moving, scattering in different directions and using the planet's gravity well to slingshot themselves into unpredictable trajectories. The USS Lincoln engaged a squadron of Vorthok cruisers near the planet's moon, drawing them away from the main battle. Captain Sandra Williams used the lunar terrain to hide her ship between attacks, appearing suddenly to fire salvos of missiles before disappearing again behind the rocky surface. The USS Washington dove straight into the middle of the enemy formation, firing in all directions and causing chaos among the Vorthok ships that were not used to such aggressive tactics. Captain Robert Chen laughed as his ship rolled and spun through the enemy fleet, his gunners targeting weapons systems and engines to disable rather than destroy when possible. Meanwhile, on the surface of Thyros, Kate Sullivan's Marines were discovering that the Vorthok were even more brutal up close than they had imagined. The alien soldiers stood over 8 feet tall, with thick armor and weapons designed to cause maximum pain. They had turned the beautiful Zelari cities into industrial nightmares, with smokestacks and mining equipment destroying centuries of peaceful architecture. Team Alpha, this is Sullivan, Kate whispered into her unit as her squad approached the first prison camp. I count 20 Vorthok guards, automated turrets on the perimeter, and approximately 5,000 Zelari prisoners. Marine teams moved with the precision of soldiers who had trained for urban combat their entire careers. They disabled the automated defenses first, using electromagnetic pulses that the Vorthok had never encountered before. Then they moved in on the guards themselves. The Vorthok soldiers had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never fought humans in close combat. They discovered that the small aliens from Earth moved faster than anything they had ever seen, hit harder than should have been possible, and refused to stay down no matter how much damage they took. Phase 2 began when the 4 human ships suddenly stopped running and turned to fight. The scattered Vorthok fleet found themselves facing an enemy that had lured them exactly where the humans wanted them, spread out, confused and vulnerable. 2 coordinated attacks. Captain Jake Morrison watched the tactical display as his plan unfolded perfectly. All ships target the command vessels. Cut off their head and the body will follow. The USS Vengeance accelerated directly toward Admiral Korthvin's flagship. The Crimson Death, the massive Vorthok dreadnought, was 3 times the size of the human ship, bristling with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Size meant nothing. If you could not hit your target, Amy, take us in close, Jake ordered. I want to be so close to that ship they can't use their main guns without hitting themselves. Amy Foster pushed the Vengeance's engines to their limits, threading the ship. Between energy beams that lit up space like deadly lightning, the human vessel dove under the Vorthok flagship and rolled along its hull, firing point-blank into critical systems. Direct hits on their command section, reported Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks. Their communications array is down. On the bridge of the Crimson Death, Admiral Korthvin felt his ship shudder under the human attack. Alarms were blaring throughout the vessel as system after system went offline. He had never experienced anything like this, an enemy ship actually daring to come within touching distance and fight at knife-fighting range. "Return fire!" he screamed at his weapons officers. "Destroy them!" But the human ship was too close, moving too fast, and positioned exactly where the Vorthok guns could not reach it. The Vengeance continued its deadly work, systematically destroying the flagship's ability to coordinate the fleet. Meanwhile, on the surface of Thyros, Major Kate Sullivan's Marines had liberated 6 prison camps and were moving on the largest facility. This camp held over 50,000 Zelari civilians, but it was also the most heavily defended position on the planet. "Team leaders, this is Sullivan," Kate whispered into her radio as her soldiers took positions around the massive compound. "Remember, the Vorthok will try to kill the prisoners rather than let us rescue them. We need to hit fast and hit everything at once." The Marine assault began with a coordinated strike that the Vorthok guards never saw coming. Human soldiers appeared from every direction at once, moving through the compound like ghosts. The alien guards found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, striking without warning and disappearing before they could respond. In space, the battle was reaching its climax. The USS Lincoln had disabled the Vorthok. Cruiser Zan was being chased by 5 more. Captain Sandra Williams used every trick she had learned in 20 years of military service, turning her ship into a deadly dancer that led the enemy vessels into a trap. "Washington, this is Lincoln," she called over the radio. "I'm bringing you some friends." The USS Washington was waiting in the shadow of a large asteroid. As the Vorthok ships chased the Lincoln around the rocky formation, Captain Robert Chen opened fire with everything he had. The surprised alien vessels found themselves caught in a crossfire between 2 human ships. "That's 4 more down," Chen reported with satisfaction. "These aliens really don't know how to fight a real war, Admiral." Korthvin watched his fleet being destroyed piece by piece and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never met an enemy that could outfight the Dominion. But these humans were not just defeating his ships, they were making it look easy. "All ships, retreat to the outer system," he ordered. "We need to regroup and call for additional reinforcements." But Jake Morrison was not about to let the Vorthok fleet escape to threaten other innocent species. "All ships, pursue and destroy. Don't let a single one of them get away." The human ships chased the retreating Vorthok fleet, picking off stragglers and damaged vessels. The aliens had superior numbers and technology, but they had never learned to fight with the desperate creativity that came from evolving on a world where everything was trying to kill you. On Thyros, Kate Sullivan's Marines had successfully liberated the main prison camp. 50,000 Zelari civilians were free, but many of them were too weak to walk after months of forced labor and starvation rations. Medical teams to the surface immediately, Kate called to the ships in orbit. "We need food, medicine, and transport for the survivors." As the human medics worked to help the liberated Zelari, Elder Thesis arrived at the camp. The old alien leader had survived the occupation by hiding in the ruins of his capital city, and he could hardly believe that salvation had actually come. "You are the humans," he said to Kate Sullivan, his voice filled with wonder. "Our messaging came all this way to help us." "That's right, sir," Kate replied, helping to load injured Zelari onto medical shuttles. "We got your distress call, but why?" Thesis asked. "We are strangers to you. Why would you risk your lives? For people you have never met?" Kate paused in her work and looked at the elderly Zelari leader. "Because that's what good people do, sir. When someone calls for help, you answer." In space, the last Vorthok ships were either destroyed or fleeing toward the edge of the system. Admiral Korthvin's flagship was heavily damaged, its weapons offline and its engines failing. The proud admiral who had conquered dozens of worlds was now running for his life from 4 small ships. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through," Korthvin said, dreading what he would hear. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the view screen, but his expression was not one of triumph or gloating. Instead, he looked tired and sad. "Admiral Korthvin, this is Captain Morrison. Your fleet is defeated. Your invasion of the Zelari system is over. You can either surrender and face trial for your crimes, or you can leave this system and never return. But the slaughter ends here." Korthvin stared at the human captain for a long moment. You have won this battle, Morrison, but the Dominion is vast. We will return with 1,000 ships if necessary. Then we'll be waiting for you, Jake, replied simply. Out. And next time, we'll bring friends. The remaining Vorthok ships limped away toward the edge of the system. Their empire's reputation for invincibility shattered by 4 human vessels and a handful of Marines. As the human fleet regrouped near Thyros, reports began coming in from across the galaxy. News of the Vorthok defeat was spreading rapidly through the galactic communication networks. Dozens of species that had lived in fear of the Dominion were suddenly daring to hope for freedom. Captain Amy Foster reported from her communications station. We're receiving distress calls from 17 different star systems. Other species heard about what we did here, and they're asking for help. Jake looked at the star charts, showing the locations of the new distress signals. Each one represented innocent people facing the same kind of brutality that the Zelari had endured. Contact Earth Command, he ordered. Tell them we're going to need more ships. Elder Thesis stood in what remained of his council chamber, looking up at the human ships in orbit around his world. The Zelari people were free, their cities could be rebuilt, and their children would grow up without fear of the Vorthok. All because strangers from a distant world had heard their cry for help and chosen to answer it. What kind of species are these humans? He asked his aide. The younger Zelari consulted the data they had gathered about Earth and its people. They come from what they call a death world, Elder. A planet where survival required them to become the most dangerous predators in their environment. They spent thousands of years fighting each other before they learned to work together. Nodded slowly, so they became monsters in order to survive. Yes, Elder, but they are monsters who use their strength to protect the weak instead of preying on them. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and thought about the future. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, and there would be consequences. Some alien species would see them as potential allies, others as threats to be eliminated. But Jake was not worried about the challenges ahead. Humanity had spent its entire history overcoming impossible odds and protecting those who could not protect themselves. They had evolved to be the galaxy's apex predators, but they had also evolved to be its guardians. Captain Ryan Brooks said, "What do you think happens next?" Jake smiled as he watched the rescued Zelari refugees boarding transport ships that would take them to safety. "We do what humans have always done, Ryan. We answer the call when someone needs help. We fight the monsters that threaten the innocent. And we make sure that no one in this galaxy ever has to face extinction alone." 3 months later, the first permanent human base was established in the Zelari system. The USS Vengeance had been joined by a dozen other human warships. More were being built in Earth's shipyards every week. The galaxy had learned that when innocent people cried out for help in their darkest hour, the monsters of Earth would come, not to conquer or enslave, but to protect and defend. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would be defined not by the worlds they conquered, but by the lives they saved. Admiral Korthvin's report to the Dominion High Command was simple: do not engage the humans.